So what was happening in video games in 1982? Let's find out.
Since Spacies.
In 2018, it's really hard to imagine that there was once a time in gaming life that you wouldn't be playing games at home. And in 1982, for me personally, that was still the case. I would have to come down to places like this to be able to get my gaming action on. And gaming action back in 1982, it meant really basic games, but we didn't care. Any slight improvement to the games was really well received. And there was a couple of milestones in 1982 that really stood out. I'm going to go through them in this video, but before I do, I was thinking back on it, and I was thinking if I was even aware in 1982 about the Atari, and I must have been, because I remember seeing the television in a shop here at Cronulla and thinking, oh my God, these graphics are so good compared to the Atari. So the Atari was on my radar, but my family was not rich enough to be able to afford one. I'd have to wait personally until 1986 before I would even get my very first console. But yeah, that's enough of my sad story. So let's have a look at the major events that took place in 1982.
In the two-dimensional world of
Released in January 1982, we get Zaxxon from Sega, and not only is it the first game to use isometric graphics, but it's also the first arcade game to get a TV commercial in North America. The game was later ported over to consoles, but obviously those consoles at the time just couldn't compete with the arcade version.
from the master design engineers of Sega.
In February of 1982, without Namco's permission mind you, we have Ms. Pac-Man. It was actually a mod game that was presented to Midway, who were looking for a sequel to the very successful Pac-Man and were getting impatient with Namco dragging the chain on releasing their sequel. Of course, the game was a hit once again with the ladies. Taito released Jungle Hunt, which is the first game to feature parallax scrolling. Namco continued their fight for dominance in the arcade racing scene with Pole Position, which was one of the first games to feature quadraphonic sound. The world's first Laserdisc game, Quarter Horse, is released by a company called Electrosport and predates Dragon's Lair, which is the more famous Laserdisc game of its era, by 1 year. And now for the consoles, and we see the beginning of some hard times ahead with Atari releasing Pac-Man. They produced 12 million cartridges or thereabouts, and only 7 million of those were sold. And this is the beginning of the end of Atari. Also released later in the year was E.T. and, well, the least said about this game the better, but we will talk more about this game in 1983's video. In 1982, we also see the very first Star Wars licensed game, Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, which was actually published by Parker Brothers. And other gaming notable releases out for 1982 were Donkey Kong Jr., Pitfall, Dig Dug, Robotron 2084, Cubit, Burger Time, Moon Patrol, Choplifter, River Raid, Xevious, Super Pac-Man, Time Pilot, Popeye, Pengo, Yar's Revenge, and one of my favourite, Bump and Jump. And last of all, for 1982, Atari renamed the Atari VCS as the Atari 2600. The Commodore 64 gets released, and I know that my UK followers will absolutely kill me if I do not mention that the ZX Spectrum was released in the UK in this year. And now back to the mothership for the Game of the Year.
So for my first nomination of Game of the Year for 1982 is the big hit from Activision. This was their first big hit, and that was Pitfall. And this was a game that was set in a world, not just on a land or a one screen. It had multiple screens, which was one of the first games from memory where you would play from one screen to the next. I know there was other ones before it, but it was that did that. But that was the first game that I played that had multiple screens. And transformed the world. If you want more information, by the way, on the Pitfall series, you might want to check out Slope's Game Room video. He done a whole series on the whole, basically every Pitfall game that has been made to date. But one little side thing that I did not see in that video was that the game was set in the world of Enoch. Yeah, Enoch. What the hell does that mean? Now, this was the first bit of trivia that I ever learnt, and that was because it was from one of the first video game magazines that I ever bought, back when Atari was huge. And the name Enoch is crane, backward, and the guy that made Pitfall ended up becoming a bit of a superstar at that time as a developer, and his name was David Crane. So there you go. So Pitfall Harry was stomping around in the grounds of Enoch. Some of the other cool little things that made this game unique was the little Tarzan yell, which I was surprised they could get away with, because another game that came out in 1982 were actually forced to change a lot of what they had, including the Tarzan yell. So they kind of snuck that across the line, where I'm not sure if they had to pay royalties to the Tarzan people. But yeah, there was that. Yeah, and I just think in general that Pitfall outdid Nintendo. They were doing what Nintendo didn't do in Donkey Kong, and I think Donkey Kong missed the trick in not coming to a console earlier and being a long-winded platformer game. I think there was a missed opportunity there for Donkey Kong back then, which in the 90s would happen with Donkey Kong Country. Another little fact that a lot of people don't realize is that there are actually 256 screens in this game. 256, there's that number again. Also, a little cool fact about Pitfall is if you got 20,000 points or more and you took a photo of your screen or your TV and sent that into Activision back in the day, they would send you out a patch, and that was the very first achievement system, which was really cool. And it actually is being maintained in this copy of Pitfall on the Activision Anthology, and this is on the PlayStation 2. It's got like an achievement system within the game based on what you needed to be able to get those patches way back in the early 80s. I'd love to get me one of those patches. I don't know if it was available here in Australia, but yeah, that was a really cool system that they had. So yeah, basic rundown on Pitfall was that it was the first game to be like a Castlevania or Metroidvania style game, but not really Metroidvania. So they kind of missed that boat by not being set in a world where you unlocked different areas. They were still just establishing, getting a world set up to begin with. But a lot of other companies would later develop and flesh out Pitfall. I just like the game. Let's just leave it at that. So for my second nomination of Game of the Year for 1982, we have Robotron 2084 or 2084. Twin stick shooter. This was the very first game, I think, that popularized the format. I think that there are other games that had twin stick operations before this one came out, but this one perfected it. And the way it came about apparently was that the developer actually injured his hand, and he was thinking, is there a way that I can get enjoyment from a game without the need of having buttons? Pac-Man achieved it, but it was only a one joystick game. But he got the idea from another game where you had to, I think it was Sheriff, I'm not sure, but you had to basically twist the controller to face the direction you wanted to shoot in, and then press the button to fire. And he figured, well, you can get the left stick to move your character around, and then get the other controller to point the direction you want to fire in. And as you press the button, the joystick around, it would just automatically fire and aim. If you want to see a really cool video on Robotron 2084, Gaming Muso has got an excellent video based on the cabinet. I suggest that you check out that video. I will put a link to that in the description below. More homework for me later, but totally worth it. Really good video. And by the way, Gaming Muso, if you haven't already subscribed to him, I think you guys should get onto that. He's up and coming. He's going to overtake me in subscribers very quickly. And yeah, not much I can do about it. So Gaming Muso, get onto him and subscribe, but check out that video while you can. But back to Robotron 2084. Just a couple of other things is that you basically are a guy going around trying to save families. You got a wife, a husband and kids before they get attacked and mutated, and it's just the plot. It doesn't really need to be said, I think. It's just insane fun. Smash TV was another game to come out years later that was very much like it, but I don't know, I like the simplicity and more importantly, the fast pace of this particular game. And another game that came out years later on the Amiga. Now I know there's a few people out there that were big into the Amiga in the day. Amiga had a game called Llamatron, and Llamasoft is still going. I can't believe it in 2018. But Llamatron was basically just Robotron 2084 featuring llama sound effects, and that was my introduction to this game, was Llamatron. And then I later found out and discovered Robotron 2084. Played it to hell. I played it so often on the Xbox 360, and the Xbox 360 version is worth getting. I'm pretty sure it's available on PlayStation 3. Just such a cool game. I know that they did a really dud version of it on Nintendo 64, but that was just what I've heard. I haven't seen it for myself to confirm that. And another little bit of trivia about this game is that the twin stick mechanic and the firing mechanic was added in at the last minute. There was not going to be any shooting in this game. They were going to use some other kind of gameplay mechanic, and it was only when the developer busted up his hand and had to come up with some other way to get the game to work if you've got limited mobility. And he managed to pull off what I think was one of the best gaming mechanics of 1982, or of the 80s in general. And my last Game of the Year nomination for 1982 is a game called Dig Dug. Now a lot of you may have seen the character from other Namco games such as Ridge Racer, being advertised on the side of the cars or billboards in that game. I reckon though a lot of you probably haven't played it. I know a lot of subscribers to my channel would have, but I think there's a chance that a lot of people have heard of it, seen it, but not got their chance to play it. Very addictive gameplay, very simple game mechanic, and it's just such a bizarre game for the time. Now, a couple of little trivia bits about this game is that it's running on the same hardware as Galaga or Galaga. It uses the same arcade machine. Also, Dig Dug is the father of Mr. Driller, which is another puzzle game which was to come out much later on the PlayStation, and I think there was an arcade game on that one. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know that Octavius Kitten loves Dr. Driller. No, Mr. Driller, sorry, Dr. Driller. He's not a doctor, he hasn't graduated. His real name, the character's real name is Taizo Hori. Taizo Hori. Yeah, not exactly 100% sure what that means, but anyway, that's his name. And the enemies are called Pukas. I think the Pukas are the guys with the red goggles, and Figars. Figars are the dragon dude that you see down there. The game has a kill screen. Yes, kill screens were really popular back then. I don't think that was by design, that was just the way they were. If you get up to level 256, there's that number again. 256 is the kill screen on Dig Dug. So there's another little bit of trivia for you. And I don't know, I found it very strange that as you play along, if you stop, the music stops. And if you keep going, then the music keeps going. It just added a really quirky game mechanic to it. Having to blow up your enemy with a vacuum. Yeah, very bizarre gameplay mechanic, but super fun. Try not to get killed by the rocks yourself. I just like the design of the character, which is why I used it for the thumbnail of this video. So my game of the year for 1982, I think you can tell, it's Pitfall. I had a real tough time with this year to pick out what the game of the year will be. Reason being is that I absolutely love Robotron 2084, and I'm partial to Dig Dug, but Dig Dug never was really going to be the winner here. But it was between Pitfall and Robotron 2084, and I'd have to say that Robotron 2084 is way more playable today than Pitfall is now. But for what Pitfall did for the gaming industry back then, I think it was a more important release. It established the developers becoming named well-known stars, basically. And yeah, David Crane, the developer, was the very first gaming personality that I got to know about, and that was from the magazines that were being released at the time. So there's that. I just like the fact that it opened up this huge world. I don't recall any other game back in that time that did that and gave you this illusion that you were in a much bigger place. So there's that. And just I know it by today's standards, the jumping mechanics is pretty lame, and it's pretty limited compared to what we've got available today. But back then, this was just pretty fun stuff. It was pretty epic, and I remember just wanting to play this for ages to try and rack up a huge score. So, Game of the Year 1982 is Pitfall, and I can't wait to get my teeth into 1983. I know a lot of people associate 1983 with the gaming crash. Yes, I will talk a bit about that, but I think there's a lot more that happened in 1983 than just the gaming crash that we all hear about. So if you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe to my channel. I will be doing this series right up until 2018 or 2019, well, up until present day. I just find it a bit of fun to go through the years and just talking about what happened in those years and what important releases were coming out. I'm actually having a lot of fun doing this. And in my next video, I will not be in Cronulla. I will be filming at another location. You'll just have to wait until the next video to find out more. And until next time, my name has been Brian, and I've been gaming since Spacies. Thanks, guys.
Since Spacies.